But surely, Paul, even with the most naive eye, you are still painting an idea of what you see. Western painting has always been a mixture of both. Vermeer did not purely paint what he saw. I agree, representing and understanding visual nature is the most important thing an artist should learn, but that alone does not create great paintings, is the offering of Genius 2. So I find this, at first I thought, I'll dismiss this, but then I realized it's actually central to the conversation I'm having with you all, and what I've had over time with, with painting itself. But let me just tell you about the ideas as I see them in painting, and because there surely are ideas, I agree with surely Genius. Ideas are involved in painting heavily. Just remember Ang's comment, unless you have a concept, that's an idea, of the thing fixed in your mind and eye, you'll just be pushing shapes around all day long. Well, that's an idea, right? And I teach people one of the most fundamental things you do when you're looking at a figure, for example, just to draw the figure, is to have an idea, right? But that is to say, have a grasp in your mind of what that figure is up to. But that's just the idea of the truth in front of you, right? So I think what Genius wants to talk about is the idea of some great statement idea, like I have an idea of projecting some spirituality or something like that. That would be in the class of what George Inness was trying to do, and so to whatever extent you're doing that, that's fine with me. But painting, it isn't required that painting. I'm talking about now about Impressionism. That is to say, finding your beauty in the milieu of the visual ensemble. That's an idea, yes. That's why I say I tell you to stand before the model and make sure you have an idea before you start painting. Idea of the gesture, idea of the proportions, idea of the impression that it's making upon you. But the other is another story, right? And you can do that. And I don't say this with any sort of what's the right word? I don't want to say this negatively, but that's art school thing. You're talking about the idea, and very much in the class of what I call the subject. So if you're going to be dominated by that, that's all right. Frankly, Western art isn't dominated precisely by that. It's actually the idea underlying painting, the idea of what makes painting the music that it is the idea of color music and play of shape and pattern and all those things. Now, are there ideas associated with that? Yeah, of course there are, but they aren't. But they're evolved. They're drawn forth, or they're created out of the stuff of the visual world that you've set up in front of you. But I don't want to limit this to the idea world. I'm just going to talk about how we use it in Impressionist painting, and I mean by Impressionist, of course, that painting in which you sit before nature, and painting as Decamps said, straight and true like a Christian, trying to draw forth the beauty of what you see. And the concept, of course, of the integrity of the looker, are you painting straight and true, or are you painting something into the picture that isn't there? Now, as I said before, I didn't say before yet, but there'll be an idea in the visual impression. There'll be something that impresses you about the painting, and for you to not grasp that before you start, and that could be called an idea. But for you not to grasp that before you start will put you in the position of just being a realist. You'll just push and push towards something more and more like, but you won't have a goal, if you want to put it that way. And so, if you want to call that an idea, and that's fine. It's very much what we mean. So let's just look at some of the paintings. By the way, Vermeer didn't purely paint what he saw. If you're looking at Vermeer, let's look at him. Vermeer didn't purely paint what he saw. I'm actually, if you want to put it in a simple way, I'm hard pressed to even slightly agree with Vermeer didn't paint precisely what he saw. Or what did you say, simply? Let me get your words. I don't want to put words in your mouth. Vermeer did not purely paint what he saw. Or you would probably say simply. He didn't simply paint what he saw. I'm very much hard-pressed to agree with that. Vermeer is like the model of somebody who painted what he saw. Now, if you want to say that he had some fascinating ideas, in relation to, some amazing grasp of what he saw, so that he could see what the underlying thing was that made it beautiful, I would lend you that. You can have that as an idea. But this guy is pure. This guy is painting what he saw. It makes nothing up in here, right? And he's not twisting things in nature to get to what he saw. That's one of those interesting things about Impressionism. We don't twist anything, but things may be left out. That is to say, our focus may be on a particular group of things, and it will be rather in the area of by chance, not by aggression, not by actively seeking to leave things out and put things in and all that sort of thing, but rather by the love of that central idea that we do have. And there's your idea word again. So yeah, that's an interesting question. Was did he not purely? Well, look again. I mean, tell me this is about as pure as paint as looking gets, right? He makes the other painters in Holland look like they were painting ideas, except didn't have very good ideas, if you want to put it that way. Not all Dutch. I don't mean that by any stretch, but those genre painters in his class, right? There's something, if they're painting what they see, somehow or other it doesn't come across as being as true. This guy just keeps coming across as being truer and truer and truer, and we're talking about the truth of the light, the truth of the shapes, of the edges, of everything we do. And then, of course, he's got this wonderful quality of design. He's what I'd like to call the architectonic, that actual use of rectangular space to its greatest advantage. I don't know if anybody in history has ever done anything quite as precisely that brilliant as this, or as appropriate, might be a better word for it, appropriate for our form. But the use of these flat pattern spaces, I think maybe next video I'll talk about the Japanese and maybe make some reference to this flat way of thinking, this way of thinking flat, or using flat to design with. But I can't see a thing in here that I would call not true, right? Did he purely paint what he saw? As much as any human can. Remember that that Impressionist painting is nature through the prism of a personality, right? Now, Alfred Stevens, perhaps Degas, I mean, any number of good, really, really, really notably good painters would say that, right? So of course there's a filter, right? But that filter doesn't imply that your goal is an idea other than an idea derived directly from what's in front of you. So if you say an idea and you mean what I'm saying, then we both agree, of course. So there's another one. The truth of these things is rather staggering. In fact, it's what gives it its charm. And what gives it its charm is the beautiful way in which it's designed in the first place. I like to keep reminding you that what Gamel said to us is very true, that your picture's only going to be as good as what you set up. That's minimal, right? It'll only be as good as what you set up. If you don't set up a beautiful color scheme, if you don't set up a good set of patterns, if you don't make a beautiful center of interest, all that sort of stuff, and then if you don't, so shall we say, frame it well, if you don't look through the viewfinder and find, the thing, the equilibrium and all that sort of stuff, and feature your get the scale, feature your center well. Of course, it won't be no amount of realism, but that's a reiterating of stuff we've been through so many times. You'll get a realism, but you won't get this kind of beauty. So I'm just going to show you Paxton now, and this is, of course, Paxton was was Hale's cohort in sort of working on that book on Vermeer, and Paxton seemed to be considerably more influenced by that research than Hale was in his own work. But here again, I'm showing you a picture, and you tell me maybe what you mean by idea. But this picture, yeah, there's an idea here. Yeah, the idea is a woman is showing her new necklace to her friend. And so there's an idea, there's a story idea, right? Now, the little study that they're in is that creates a little subject world, right? So the little genre picture with the beautiful tapestries on the wall, so all that sort of thing, the big picture, the big painting on the wall, nicely framed, and et cetera, nice clothes. So we're looking at something of an idea of a sophisticated interior. So that's an idea, I guess, right? But there's nothing in the pursuit of this thing that obviates the necessity to be straight and true in your relationships of values and all those sorts of things. So any underlying idea, he sets it up, he designs it, he decides he crops how he's going to crop, and then he goes and standing before nature, he finds the underlying idea. That is that thing with which he is filled. What makes him even want to paint the picture, as I often say. And he aims at that and goes, right? But every mark he makes is this to this and that to that, straight and true like a Christian in the midst of the picture. If anything happens in the picture that, if he goes into mindlessness, and I mean actually has walkabout or something like that, this picture will come out as realism. But if he maintains the underlying unity of his grasp of that thing, the visual, yes, and you call that an idea if you like. If you mean that, yeah, that's agreed to. We agree that that's an idea that underlies his grasp of the thing in front of him, and it will direct him through the entire thing. His sense of beauty, the golds in this picture, for example, or the gold to blues, the interesting distribution or play of those two. And I, by the way, don't trust any of these pictures to be true. And of course, they're always exotically brilliant in their light effects because of the light coming through your monitor. So the falseness of them is patent. But so anyway, so we can just look at a couple more. I'm going to look at, let's actually go back to the quote again. I'm just going to flash back through there. But surely, Paul, even with the most naive eye, you're still painting an idea of what you see. So if we agree on those points, we're not in, if you understand it the way I understand it, we don't disagree at all. Western painting has always been a mixture of both is an interesting, very interesting one. The mixture of both implies that there's a distortion going on. And in the early Renaissance, for example, there's falsehood. People didn't understand what they were seeing. They didn't have a Meldrum science of appearances sort of thing, where they were simply playing with the values the way eventually, by the time you get to the 19th century, people saw how they could get more truth in front of themselves. So, it's not just been a mixture of what you, the truth of what you see. That was what would you call that? Those aren't even, to my mind, they become, like, for example, in Botticelli, they become line ideas. There's no question about that. And the line play and all that sort of stuff becomes his central motive, but it's not in the same class of animal. So did he just choose lines so that he would be able to express his ideas? No, he was stuck with them. So in that sense, he'd be no different from anybody else. But it's a fascinating question. Has it always been a mixture of both? You could argue to lesser and greater degrees, depending on what we mean by ideas. Again, if you're talking about El Greco, you're talking about, if you want to call it, a spiritualization, that goes on, or what appears to be some attempt to make these guys convey that they are somehow spiritual beings or in spiritual states or something like that. That's, yeah, and the deformities in nature are done, but the greatest art doesn't deform nature. It just doesn't do that. The rarity of it is remarkable, actually. It doesn't deform it for the purpose. I mean, I don't even know if you want to say that Rubens deformed nature so that it could fit the Baroque idea. Well, that's fine. I guess you could say that's really what he did. I guess this stuff doesn't represent Impressionist truth, right? It doesn't represent the naive eye and the training you'd receive. He's operating from a very different place, but I don't think he's doing it with an idea, the Rococo idea, as much as the Baroque idea, whatever that is. As much as he's doing it, he finds some mechanism to create his sort of cartoon figure, and then he puts them together really nicely. And his cartoon figure, by the way, that's an exaggeration, but it is a figure out of his head. He's got his own figure look, and he even winds up, I'd have to say, deforming portraits into that style. So, but I don't think he does. I think he just does it because that's his medium. He actually has bought into the idea that you have to create your own figure, and then everything is, and everything is then possible for you. You can then create comic book art, so to speak. And I really don't say that in a demeaning way. I'm talking about being able to put figures together like illustrations with your own figures, make them do whatever you want, and then make your own story thing there. That whole set of ideas associated with that, I think, is significantly different. So Vermeer didn't paint purely what he saw. Well, that's, uh, so I agree representing and understanding visual nature is the most important thing an artist should learn, but that alone doesn't create great painting. And that part, by the way, we completely agree with, that that doesn't alone create great painting. In other words, if you don't have, 10 other people could stand in front of this Vermeer and not paint it as beautifully as this. In other words, they may not have a grasp of what the underlying beauty is, or the photograph may not do the justice to it in the same way, or do the, what shall we say, justice to it. I mean, do focus the beauty. Focus you on that central idea of the what you find to be the beauty of this picture. But so if you think I'm saying something else, I think we're saying the same thing. I don't think there's any question about it. I can't draw anything and have it look like anything that I value, not without having a grasp of the overall beauty of the general impression. And each time I move to a smaller and smaller place, I have a grasp of the beauty of that. Just the relationships of three or four things, you have to have an idea of that. And that's where the sort of the rubber meets the road with this idea thing, right? So there's the greater idea that you're heading for, like when you're doing a figure, you're trying to, and just talking about the gesture, there's the greater idea of what this thing overall is doing. And then there's every single little angle, and the angle played to the other angles, or the curves playing, one curve played to a straighter line, playing into a line that's not as curved, or curved in a different way. That interplay of shapes, you have to get a concept of that. And that's what Ang's talking about. If you don't get a concept of that, you're pushing shapes around all day long. Concept/idea, okay? So just to, again, remind you that this really isn't an argument with myself and genius. I think we're actually agreeing completely. But Impressionism does something where you can suggest that there's an ambiguity in intention. The idea is to paint exactly what you see. Gamma will repeat that, and when anything you read by him, the idea of the Impressionist is to paint to really, honestly, truthfully power up exactly what you see. The only problem is you rather, so to speak, can't. you by perforce, it has to come through your, what you would call it, your perceptual apparatus, and inevitably there's going to be, for example, a grasp of the beauty of the thing, and you will do extra work, shall we say, to make sure that you get the relationships that produce that beauty. And that beauty won't be the same, maybe necessarily, of some other person painting on the same spot, right? So, and you can attribute that to all sorts of things, but nevertheless, you yourself won't get a satisfying result out of your Impressionist painting if you don't have an idea of how things play, what the beauty is of how things are playing together. And, even the distribution on the page, say, of this Tarbell portrait of the judge, even the distribution on the page is an element of the beauty, within that rectangle. And if you don't have a grasp of that, you're not going to get the accuracy of it. So if you don't have a grasp of the idea of how that plays. So that's the practical use of the word idea, but it extends all the way from the littlest thing you put down, for example, top and bottom, and getting the relationship between them. You have a concept of how the top and the bottom relate to each other. That's a concept, it's an idea. And you have to have the whole time, you have to be preceded by an idea of the thing as a whole. And if it's not informed, as I'm going to say again, if it's not informed by your sense of beauty, then it will be rather in the sense of merely photographic. Okay? So that's where I'll give you the idea and happily get along, right? I look closer at that portrait by Decamp down below. It's a really wonderful example of, for example, the hairline, the articulate differentiation of sharp edge, lost edge, and all sorts of variations in the class of what we call edge work, right? And this picture is so nuanced, so delightfully nuanced. And but here's the guy who said, "Paint straight and true like a Christian," drawing forth the beauty of his young daughter. Now, I'm saying the beauty of his young daughter, but the beauty of the ensemble, the beauty of the design, the beauty of the whole thing. So how many of those things are ideas? Well, they're all ideas, right? So yeah, so in one sense, there's nothing a human does that isn't idea-based. Absolutely right. And so I thank you for the question, or the point, actually. And I bet you we don't even disagree a little bit. So if there's some part of this that I've of your question I failed to grasp, please do let me know. But I would just encourage the viewer the viewer of this video, to really think this through. This is like in terms of Impressionist painting, this is the crux of it. Surely there is an idea underlying Vermeer's work. Surely there's an idea underlying everything that happens in nature. But it's not a thing that deviates. As I said, there's no ambiguity. It doesn't deviate from nature. It just doesn't necessarily cover every single jot and tittle of the points, right? It actually has a point to make, and that is the underlying sense of beauty that the performer, that the viewer, the artist, has been impressed by. So yeah, I could probably say more, but I'd be, I really, when you go back into the ancient history, talk about ideas this way and think about them this way, and watch out for all sorts of other idea things that happen. I will agree with you, they all happen. And there's no hesitation in saying that George Inness he says he was trying in some way to do some Swedenborgian thing to his paintings to give you a sense of something spiritual or something like that. And the fact is, if you look at these two paintings I'm showing you right now, if there's not a sense of something spiritual here, I mean, like wakey wakey. But I think he actually meant something very particular in terms of a spiritual idea that he had. Maybe I'm not fully conversant in Inness's thing, but yeah, when he took it home and started messing with it, he was trying to convey something, which turns out to be a feeling-based thing, something based on mood. And there are certain deformities to nature, which are not really typical of Impressionist work, and certainly not in the way that would be rather intentional, with a search for creating some sort of an odd mood or something like that. So anyway, there's so much deep stuff I could get into here. I'd rather not. It's just fun to look at these pictures, isn't it? Just look at them and see what they do. Well, thank you. It's nice to be back. We missed a week, and we got a couple of very, very nice donations. Thank you, Gail. And I think I thanked Lindsay before, but they're showing up now. So with much appreciation, do share, comment, subscribe, and all those things. It's a big help if you appreciate what we're trying to do. And I wish you well in your efforts.